What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, and I'm super excited to have Pedro Moura of The Athletic joining us today. 3 months exactly from the day the Dodgers won the World Series. And for those unfamiliar, Pedro's been covering the Dodgers for a little while now at the Orange County Register, then the LA Times, now at The Athletic. And for my money, he seems to be the most plugged-in guy as far as Dodger-wise goes. So I'm grateful for him taking some time to join us. And Pedro, to honor your time, I guess I'll just jump right in and ask, what's your reaction to the offseason so far? I mean, it's been slow, but as somebody who's kind of plugged in and has been following this team, did you expect it to play out the way that it has?
That's an interesting question. I'm not a soothsayer. I don't always understand what they're doing when they're doing it, and so I think it would be disingenuous for me to say that I expected, a Trinan resign, a Corey Knebel ad, but in broad strokes, yes, this is exactly what I expected. Like, I don't ever get the individual things perfectly right or anything like that. But yeah, this is what I expected them to do: tinker on the edge, on the margins, find what they believe to be well-priced additions to their bullpen that have the potential to be big ads. I think both Knebel and Trinan fit into that. Mm-hmm. Tommy Kahnle obviously also fits into that, although not in 2021. But makes perfect sense when you think about what the Dodgers like in players. It's someone who could in a year be one of the 10 or 20 best relievers in baseball, and it costs them very little. It's exactly the kind of moves they like to make. And the last thing I've been expecting, and so many have been expecting around baseball, is a reunion with Justin Turner. It's not a guarantee, but and it still hasn't happened yet, obviously, as everyone listening to this, watching this knows. But I think it's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, I expect the Dodgers to make some sort of other veteran right-handed bat addition to play third or second or maybe somewhere else. But I think it just makes the most sense for the Dodgers to eventually agree to something with Justin Turner.
Yeah, I mean, and the Turner one, you nailed it. I mean, you're plugged into Dodger fans as well. I mean, that's what's on everybody's mind. What can you tell us? I mean, the sense just as a fan looking at the outside, it seems like the holdup right now is contract length. Is it more complicated than that, or do you think it just comes down to the Dodgers at 2 years and Turner looking for 3 or more?
So Ken Rosenthal, our national baseball writer at The Athletic, is far better informed on this kind of stuff than I am. That's what you just described is exactly what he's reported. Okay. And I think both sides have a lot of respect for each other. And I think the Dodgers' perspective, if I had to guess, is, let this player who they have built a long-term relationship with explore what else is out there and see if he can, acquire something that is significantly better than what they're willing to offer. I do not under any circumstances expect the Dodgers to offer him 4 years, right? Yeah. If someone else is going to offer him 4 years at the same AAV that what the Dodgers are, he might actually sign elsewhere. But he's 36 years old. I don't think he's going to get 4 years from somebody else. And so I think over time it's likely that they're just going to meet. And maybe it's going to be, we think of it as no, the Dodgers aren't likely to give a 36-year-old player a 3-year deal, but we're increasingly seeing. The Yankees gave DJ LeMahieu a 6-year deal, right? Yeah. I don't think that deal counts on DJ LeMahieu being a good player by the time he's 37, 38 years old. I think it's the sort of luxury tax cap extensions that we've seen, that he popularized. And the Dodgers even did when they re-signed Chase Utley a couple years ago to that 2-year, $2 million deal, but he only played the first year of it. And it's just to extend the value of it. So maybe it is a deal where they pay Turner for 3 years. Yeah. And that they would do that potentially if they feel so extended by other teams, right? If the Blue Jays or somebody else is forcing them to. But 2-year deal, Justin Turner, I could see that happening. I wouldn't be surprised if at any point that it wouldn't be that surprising to me if while we're on this we figure our phones buzz and this happens. That's the likely outcome, I would say.
And just quickly, I mean, has your confidence changed at all over the course of the offseason about Turner coming back? Like, would you say you're as confident now as you have been, or do you feel like maybe some things have changed where there is some other teams potentially creeping in?
No, it hasn't changed that much, and maybe that's just due to a lack of information from my end. I couldn't claim to be, deeply involved on like who is giving Turner the best offer, what kind of interest exactly. That stuff stays fairly private. But no, I think throughout, like from November or from October 28th on, what I've expected is it's more likely than not that Justin Turner re-signs with the Dodgers. And I think there's really been no point at which that hasn't been the case in my mind. No.
Yeah. Connected to the Justin Turner conversation is one I'm interested in, related to a guy that would kind of be the primary fill-in if Turner were not to resign, which is Edwin Rios. What's your perception of how the Dodgers view Rios? I think of sort of one extreme would be kind of like a Jock Peterson type, where it's like, hey, he's a great bat, but we don't view him as an everyday guy to plug in there, versus maybe they do view him as a potential everyday option, maybe not at third, but somewhere. Where do you see Edwin Rios's career kind of going from what you've heard?
It's a great question. I think one that doesn't get talked about enough because there have so many good players. Rios' playing time has been really limited. But if you look at his major league at bats to date, I mean, this guy's slugged like 600.
It's insane.
Not that I expect that necessarily to continue, but it would be reasonable to expect him to hit like a Major League Baseball, a regular at this point. I think that would be a fair interpretation of how he's played thus far.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. I mean, is that the sense from within the Dodgers? Because I'm looking at you like at the numbers, saying he seems to have done everything to prove he deserves this opportunity. I'm not sure if inside maybe they have a different perception.
Well, the thing is with the Dodgers, just because someone's done everything to deserve an opportunity doesn't mean they get the opportunity, right? I mean, Chris Taylor deserves the opportunity. Is he going to go into 2021 as an everyday player? I don't know. How many other teams would that be the case on?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the beauty and the problem of the Dodgers if you're a player, right? They help players, their player development is unparalleled, but you really have a problem finding everyday playing time if you're someone like Rios, who was never really has never been a top prospect at any point, and is not young for prospects, and really is not a prospect in any real sense, but is just a guy who you'd like to see get more time. And maybe the Dodgers will. A DH would really help him. It would help him as much as anyone in baseball that I'm aware of. I mean, other than like maybe a free agent like Osuna or Cruz. But in terms of players on rosters, Rios would benefit hugely by that. And there still is an expectation by a lot of people within the game, and including me, although I'm not in the game, but I share this expectation that eventually there's going to be a DH in the National League. And that would benefit Edwin Rios a lot. As much as he's improved his defense at third base, which I think he did a lot in 2020, he is still a player who would just the flexibility of being able to have that bat in the lineup would be huge for the Dodgers. And so I think it's more likely than not that he opens next year this season without a full-time role. That's just the reality of it. Is that fair to him? Probably not, but he's going to get chances. The way the Dodgers run things, even their bench players do get at bats. Kike Hernandez never had a full-time, never spent a full season as a starter, but he batted a lot. If you look at his tenure with the Dodgers, he had a lot of 450, 500 plate appearance seasons. And that's probably hard to envision for Rios because he doesn't have that much positional flexibility. But I could see him, let's say they play 160 games in 2021. I could see him batting 350 times, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the DH. I mean, obviously there's this belief that in 2022 and beyond, the DH will be around. In 2021, which is crazy to think of how far into the offseason we are, how close we are to the regular season, that there's still uncertainty. Do you think, and I mean, even a guy like Justin Turner, if you sign him to a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal, I think part of that is dependent upon what role he might have available to him then. So do you get the sense, are the Dodgers operating under the assumption that the DH will exist in 2021? Is there as much uncertainty on their end as there seems to be everywhere else? Or how do you think that's impacting things?
I think they are operating as if there will not be, but like the Dodgers always are, they're ready for the possibility that it will, and it worked just fine for them last year. It worked incredibly well for them last year. And that's the benefit of the optionality that they constantly prize, is that they're prepared for a bunch of different outcomes. It would be nice to know, but it would be nice to know for every team. And you could argue that the Dodgers actually benefit because they're more prepared for either outcome than most teams are. Right, like a team that would want to acquire a designated hitter, it needs to know that now, because they might have only $20 million to spend on a salary for the next season, and whether that money goes to Osuna or a pitcher, is relevant to them, right? And pitchers might be going off the market. The Dodgers, I don't think are huge players in that category. What it means to them is just how much playing time is Edwin Rios going to get? How much time can they count on resting Justin Turner if they do come to an agreement with him? That sort of stuff. Can AJ Pollock get at bats not in left field. If there's a DH, then all of a sudden you can acquire another outfielder pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
But without a DH and you want to play Pollock, where are you gonna play him? So it opens up some additional flexibility, but it's just like for every team. Yes, they would like to know, but they'll be okay either way.
Yeah. Yeah. Shifting outside of the Justin Turner specific type of stuff, there's a lot of names that have been connected to the Dodgers. Some of those names have now, over the last week or so, gone off of the market. Is there a name out there that you personally see as a fit with the Dodgers, either via free agency or even via trade, that maybe hasn't really gotten a ton of buzz? I mean, Ozuna, that name came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden there was this thing, and then it was like, well, the sourcing on that was sort of suspect, it seems like. But is there a name out there that maybe people haven't been talking about, that not even from a plugged in perspective, but just as a fan saying, man, this seems like it would be a good fit?
I'm not sure that I have one. I mean, there's been a few relievers. I wouldn't have been surprised if they came to agreement with Kirby Yates or Brad Hand.
Yeah.
Hand got more than the industry expected at the start of the offseason. And so it depends on price, right? I think anytime there's a reliever who has been good or could be good, one of those two things the Dodgers could be interested. Basically, you can find the free agent market of anyone who in the last 5 years has had a dominant season, or at one point people thought he could put together a dominant season. The Dodgers could sign that man, whoever that is. Besides that, no, I don't think so. I mean, I cannot think of a time that the Dodgers under Andrew Friedman signed a free agent position player to not be a starter.
Yeah.
I can't think of one. I mean, when they sign guys, it's because they think they're impact position players. And otherwise they use their organization to fill the bench roles. So it's not like the Ned Flighty era where you would sign someone like Skip Schumacher to a reserve deal, right? They have bench events, but it's just not the sort of thing that they don't go out and acquire guys to 2-year, $6 million deals to fill out the bench. I mean, so much of that has gone away in this modern era of baseball. Like the older middle class of major leaguers don't find jobs like that. But I don't think so. I mean, I don't think they don't have an everyday spot available. They want to preserve something for Gavin Lux in the event that he becomes what people have long thought he could become. I don't know that there's a position player that I really pegged him for. No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you one last question, then we'll do some rapid fire before you go. I did a segment earlier on our show this week talking about Michael Busch and Cody Hosey, a couple of young prospects that are growing in stature, it seems like, in the prospect circles. And do you have sense, like, when they think about guys like Busch and Hosey and even Lux, I mean, how do the Dodgers approach players like that? Because we talk about Rios, it seems like they almost just, I don't want to say ignore that those guys exist, but they're like, whatever, we have a third base need now, we're just going to go sign someone. And like, if Rios doesn't get 500 bats, then Rios doesn't get 500 bats. Like, how do the Dodgers, from your perspective, balance these prospects coming up, right? Because you got Will Smith as one example who came right up and is now the everyday catcher. And then you have other guys who maybe haven't gotten that opportunity. So how do the Dodgers process that as a win now mode while also trying to get opportunities for some of these young prospects?
Yeah, I think it's another good question. I think they'd like to know that the guy is ready, right?
Yeah.
And in the case of Cody Hosey or Michael Busch, it's so hard to know. In the case of any prospect from last, because they didn't play against competition last year. So I think it's just incredibly difficult to entrust a position to a guy who hasn't played in the major leagues, right? Who didn't play in the major leagues last year. If there's ever, it's even more important in 2021 than any time that I've been covering baseball, because of the lack of minor league play last season. I think we're still a little ways away from those guys being major league contributors. I think it's Zach McKinstry's time really to contribute at those positions before it is either of those two, because McKinstry, played a little bit in the major leagues and also has already demonstrated he can handle the upper level of the minors, which neither of those two players that you mentioned have. But I think both of them are, really future Dodgers, I guess. That's the way the organization looks at them, from what I understand. And it's just a matter of whether that's 22, 23, one of those 2 years probably. And but yeah, so much of it depends on spots, right? Availability. Taylor's, is going to be a free agent eventually. That could be a role that one of those two takes over. This is a team that's going to generally have, I think, two true utility guys on its bench. That's the way they view themselves as best operating, at least under these current roster constraints. So I think both of them could be fits pretty soon. It's just I wouldn't count on this season, at least not early this season.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's get you out of here with some rapid fire questions. I know so often, we read your stuff, but you do a great job of obviously focusing on the baseball, but I'd love to get sort of a little bit of who you are a little bit. So the first question is, what's your favorite thing to do in your free time?
Cook.
Cook. Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular type of food?
It changes a lot. I go through stages of, especially during the pandemic. It's been
Yeah.
I feel like there's been about a month where I only want to cook Indian food, and then there was a month where I only want to cook things from from China. And now it's like Italian. It's just Italian for me. It's comfortable. It's been a cold week in LA, and I apologize to everyone not from here because it's 50
relative.
I haven't been outside because I don't have the jackets for it. But that's like, that to me is like a nice, comforting, like pasta e ceci has been a thing, like stews, pastas. Right now I'm on Italian. It's been I love it.
Are you making like your own noodles and everything?
No. I go to a place in Pasadena, Semolina, that sells. They make their own fresh pasta. I go there every week and pick up stuff.
Love it.
The woman who runs it is wonderful. She knows her stuff. Semolina. Would love to support them.
There you go. Awesome. Okay, all-time favorite baseball player, personally.
Because
you grew up in LA, so I don't know if you grew up, but did you grow up a Dodger fan?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I was 13 during 2004, during the 2004 season, and Adrian Beltre at that time. 13, I think, is like the peak of fandom in some ways, or right around that age for people. And that was when, the 48 homers, 121 RBI. It felt like it just felt like you were watching like magic on television. I would turn on KCAL and it was. I don't think I could. I haven't really been a fan of any sports since I was 19-ish now. And so, but I'll always think back to, I had a 2 year span. I'm not anymore, but I'm one of the only Buccaneers fans in the world somehow. And I grew up one. And in, January 26, 2003, they won the Super Bowl. And then the next year the Dodgers were good. And that was the peak of my fandom. And with baseball, for football, it's Rondé Barber. And for baseball, it has to be Adrian Beltre.
Love it. Yeah, we're similar ages, it sounds like, but Beltre felt like the first, post Piazza, I guess, he was kind of the closest the Dodgers had to a superstar. It was a pretty dry stretch there between 88 and, about 7 or 8 years ago.
So I started to be a fan basically right after the Piazza thing, because I was just a little young, and then they really lacked. Sheffield, every kid in my local sport was trying to do the Sheffield bat swing, but it was just Beltre for me that really sparked the. He was just so young and so good and so much potential. It was a wild time.
I love the story that they signed Beltre a year before they were legally allowed to sign him as like a 15-year-old or something. And you look back, you're like, yeah, totally worth it. That's fine. Like whatever the punishments and consequences were, well worth it.
Yeah, it does seem in retrospect to have been worth it. Yeah.
What's the greatest game or moment that you've gotten to witness in person? This could be as a fan or as somebody that's gotten to cover, and not even necessarily Dodger specific if you don't want to go that route.
I don't know. I've been lucky to cover a few big ones. I'm trying to think. Maybe like this is a stupid thing, but I just loved it so much in that moment. The Puig home run and Eduardo Rodriguez glove throw was. If I think about a moment that I enjoyed the most, that was I was in pure elation just watching the entire sequence of both extremes of human emotion, just right in front of us.
Yeah.
And I can remember exactly how I felt. I think I might have uttered an expletive or yelled it in the press box just because it was just perfect. It was perfect. I don't know. I think when I worked in newspapers, it's hard to enjoy the extra innings in late games because you're worried about getting things into the paper on deadline. So you're not as much I was there for the Uribe home run against the Braves in what year was that? 13 NLDS. But I was trying to frantically write something, so I didn't necessarily take a moment to just appreciate the extreme. I mean, I just remember the press box shaking. But I guess like that moment, it's not like it's. I understand it probably sounds stupid to fans. I wasn't there at the World Series this year. I was watching from home, but that it's the Puig and Rodriguez, just the extreme.
Love it. No, I mean, I get it. Obviously, you've been in far more than me, but like I always think to Manny Ramirez and some of the moments that he had at Dodger Stadium, like that's it for me. As silly as it sounds, having been at like some playoff victories and that kind of thing. But
the bobblehead scene, were you talking about that?
Yeah. Favorite player to interview or interact with since being on the Dodger beat?
Ross Stripling. That's probably not surprise to people. Yeah, very, very friendly fellow. Goes out of his way to help people and be nice to everyone. Got to go with Stripling.
Love it. Okay, is there a guy on the Dodgers that you think might surprise some people in a good way this upcoming season?
Maybe Rios. I mean, he still doesn't have much of a national, profile. I mean, I don't think there's that many fans who. He just hasn't had that many at bats. Hasn't had any string of everyday play. I would think Rios, if he gets a chance to hit. I mean, he has a absolutely beautiful swing. I'm not a scout. I'm not a baseball expert, but when you watch him connect on a swing, it's freaking gorgeous. It is really pleasant to watch. And if you get that kind of guy going on a run, when people are paying attention, I could see him becoming a pretty big figure.
Yeah, and hitting like 7th or 8th in the lineup, with like no pressure and probably just getting fastballs. At least to start with, till people realize that's a bad idea. Okay, last one. Scale of 1 to 100. How confident should Dodger fans be about their chances to repeat this year?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think they're still the best team in baseball. I don't know, in a given year, the chances of even the best team repeating or winning, ignoring last season, chances of the best team winning are like 20%, right? So you should feel about 20% confident, I guess. This is the best team. They have, I guess the one downside is you have one of the 3 or 4 best teams in baseball also in your division. That does not make it easier, and that makes it harder. But yeah, I mean, there's no one that I would bet on before. I would bet on the Dodgers. Yes, it's going to be something to monitor as far as do they experience a World Series hangover or anything of that nature. That was an issue in 2018. Players later admitted that was a big part of the reason they struggled in April and May so much in that year. And so if that's something we see from afar in spring training in the early part of the regular season, then maybe adjust that. But as of now, I don't, this is a really talented roster. This is a roster that I cannot really see. I mean, what would have to happen for them to win fewer than 92, 93 games? A lot.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how they don't make the playoffs. And, once you get into the playoffs, there's a huge element of randomness at play. But I think the Dodgers are as good a bet as anyone.
Awesome. Well, Pedro, I appreciate your time. Everybody check out The Athletic. They've got great stuff. Pedro, Andy McCullough, Ken Rosenthal, among others. Is there somewhere where people can find you on social media, Pedro?
Yeah, I'm not tweeting that much these days. I find it to be a sort of a sad, just a lot to process on that platform. But my name, you can find me by my name on there, and I probably when the season starts, I'll be on there more. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for everyone for watching. We will see you next time. And as we always do, we'll leave you with the words of Vin Scully.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.